We left off in the Rambam, where the Rambam himself says that although tshuva and crying out to Hashem is something very positive, regardless when you do tshuva and when you cry out, but it's especially valuable during the 10-day period from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Those are the words of the Rambam. Hu yofed b'yoser. It's exceptionally special. And then he adds, umeskapelas hi miyad. And Hashem accepts it immediately. It's not it's put on the docket and we have to deliberate whether it's yes or no. It's immediately accepted. It's kabelas hi miyad. Shenemar cites the verse, Dirsh Hashem b'motzo. Seek out Hashem when he's found. Now, he's saying that although it's positive anytime to do tshuva and to call out to God, but during this time, it's especially special. Why? Because it says, and it's Meskabel Smiyad, Hashem accepts the tshuva immediately, because it says, call out to God when he's close. Okay? Now, how do I see from that pasuk that the tshuva is accepted immediately? It's not Hashem has to deliberate, yes, no. How is that indicated? From Dirsh Hashem b'motzo. Now, if Hashem says, seek me out when I'm close, when I'm found and when I'm close, why is he sharing that with me? Is it to tell me you have your best shot, but the answer is what? You're going to have to wait for an answer. Meaning, to be considered, it's this time. Any other time, it wouldn't be considered. That's what Hashem said. Seek me out when I'm found. Right? So that's seek me out now and call to me when I'm close. Is the response going to be immediately? I would say this time is from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. If I got to wait 3 months, so what's the value of calling to Hashem when he's close and when he's found if the response is not within the reasonable amount of time? That's the question. So Rambam from the pasuk that it says you should seek me out when I'm found and call to me when I'm close. Why now and not any other time? Because now the response is immediately. Because it's not immediate, it takes a few days. By that time, if it's the midas adin, if the attribute of justice is in place, it may be too late. You know, they used to call it, Johnny come late. And when Johnny comes late, it's a problem. You have to be there on time. He says it's especially good, and it's received immediately because it says Dirsh Hashem b'motzo. Seek him out when he's found, and because we have to have the answer by Yom Kippur. If he's going to allow us to wait for 2 weeks, it's too late. But he says, "B'medvar mamure biyochid." When do we say that the best time to call out to God is during this period of time? That's when we're speaking about a yochid, an individual. Avel tzibur, but a congregation, kol zman she'osim tshuva v'tzoakim. As long as they're in a state of tshuva, v'tzoakim b'leiv shalem, but they have to cry out to him with a full heart, with full sincerity. The sincerity aspect, that component is not compromised. Avot tzibur, kozman she'osim tshuva v'tzokim b'leiv shalem. Heimnenim. The tzibur, whenever they call out, was based on the verse. Moshe says, is there anybody as great as our God? Whenever we call out to him, he responds. And that's the Rambam. But the Rambam adds something, which I mentioned yesterday. Kozman she'tzokim b'leiv shalem. They have to call out with a full heart. with the most immense level of sincerity. Only then does he respond. Okay? Now, when he speaks about the individual doing tshuva during this 10-day period, he says the individual just has to call out and he's answered immediately. He doesn't say that the individual, when he calls out to Hashem, he calls out with a full heart. Doesn't say that. When he speaks about the congregation throughout the year, when they call out, regardless of what time of the year it is, Hashem will respond. But the prerequisite is they have to call b'leiv sholim. When the individual calls out and Hashem responds, which is during that 10-day period, Rambam doesn't mention that when he prays b'leiv sholim. He prays with full dedication. So where the Rambam gets it from, I don't know. But the Rambam is interjecting here something of his own understanding that because Hashem is so close, therefore you don't even need b'leiv sholim. Even if you're slightly distracted, you're not fully committed, and it's not fully sincere, Hashem still will accept it. We said earlier that there's no obligation to take tshuva. Throughout the year, you have no obligation. The Rambam says if you want to do tshuva, this is how you do it, but you have no obligation. Now the Rambam says, what about on Yom Kippur itself? Yom Kippur is like the end of the road. Does one have an obligation to do tshuva? On Yom Kippur, so the Rambam says, Yom Kippurim huzman tshuva lakol. Yom Kippur is the time to do tshuva for every Jew, individual, liyochel rabim, whether it's an individual or the community. It's the end of the period of forgiveness on deliberate and inadvertent act. It's the end. A person goes to the guillotine, and then afterwards you review his case afterwards. It's not going to bring him back to life. So the Rambam says, today, the Rambam says we have an obligation. Why do you have an obligation? Because it's Zman Tshuva Lakol Yochel Rabim V'Kates Mechilu Slich Yisrael. Because it's now or never. By the end of Nila, which is the closing service of Yom Kippur, we no longer say Kosveinu, inscribe us in the book of life. We say Chosmeinu, seal us. Now we're ready for what? For the final verdict. You have all your supplications in, all your certificates are in, all your applications are in, and it has to be in. That's the deadline. Because Hashem is going to give a decision by the end of the 10th day. So if he's giving obligation, he tells you to do tshuva. What does that mean? It's not optional. And if you only succeed by covering 90%, and you can do 100%, you should do 100%. Umitzvidu Yom Kippurim. So now he speaks about the tzibur doing tshuva and individual tshuva. Leficha chayavim hakol lasos tshuva l'svat Yom Kippurim. That because it's the end of forgiveness period, and it's the end of what? All other areas of divine assistance, therefore it now or never. Leficha chayavim hakol lasos tshuva l'svat Yom Kippurim. Very important aspect that has relevance to every one of us. We all have whisperings in our ears to discourage us from doing the right thing. Some comments, Larry.
Rabbi, is vidui inappropriate to say, think of, or internalize all year long?
Vidui it's praiseworthy. If a person makes a confession when he has no obligation to confess, you have no obligation. Yom Kippur, its own because it's the end, it's the final moment that you're able to. Otherwise, you carry the full debt. So of course, Torah says you must confess. That's Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. Throughout the year, you say, I can do it tomorrow, I can do it next month, I can do it 6 months from now. So there's nothing pressing. Therefore, it's praiseworthy if you choose to say vidui. The same vidui as you say on Yom Kippur.
Okay.
You're confessing that you made a mistake, or that you deliberately did not do it, or it was almost on a defiant level, you didn't do it. I know I should have, I chose not to, because I don't value it. And when you do tshuva, you're doing tshuva on that.
But Rabbi, if saying a prayer, as you talked about a moment ago, by repetitive tends to, excuse me, put it in your memory, memorialize it, or they say concretize an abstract notion, then if you say vidui often enough, clearly it will reinforce itself. So therefore, saying it or concentrating on it or trying to internalize it, you say is praiseworthy. So it would be something somebody would do. It wouldn't create excessive guilt, so to speak, but it would strengthen one's feeling about their need to confess. And is that true? Or would it sort of dampen it because you keep saying it and it doesn't, I think you understand where I'm going.
Not what I'm saying like this. If a person, let's say, was condemned to die, and the judge is willing to reconsider, and the reconsideration is based on the way you plead your case, the way you plead for mercy. And he's advised when you plead, it's not enough to go back once, you have to go back 10 times. And he understands if the judge doesn't buy into his plea, his life is over. That's how serious it is. If the man comes back 10 times or 15 times, but knowing that's going to make a difference whether he evokes the mercy of the judge or not, does he go with the same fervor every time he goes, because he understands the consequence that if the judge should say no, his life is over. So it's not really dependent on the amount of times, it's how you perceive your level of liability. If you perceive your level of liability, it's not serious. The more you confess, it becomes almost like a farce. Doesn't have that much meaning. Because initially, you're not really fully sincere because you don't appreciate how wrong it was. But if a person could appreciate how wrong something is, and how, because you have to, it says, let's say, 10 times you should confess, which indicates the seriousness. So this man understands until he makes his final plea, he's not in the free zone. He can actually be destroyed, taken out. So, as I said, as you appreciate the wrong of transgression, that will determine whether it's just lip service, as many times as you say it, or that's something which emanates from your essence, because that's your value system.
That's actually the sort of what I was asking relative to, you once taught us something to say when you walk by the mezuzah, and the question becomes, does that become commonplace or ordinary or lip service, as you say, or do you think of it and recognize what you're really saying every time you acknowledge God's presence and whatever when you walk by a mezuzah? And so maybe I'm thinking that if you're saying, if you say vidui and you understand what you're saying and you feel it, then there is an incredible value to say it.
But otherwise, it's lip service. It means nothing. Has no value whatsoever.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Even the first time it has no value. If the emotion is not connected to the words, and just saying words, it means nothing. Has no value.
But isn't that true for every prayer? Isn't that true?
No.
Oh, okay.
You put on tefillin, and you don't think about tefillin, but you put them on. You're credited for tefillin. Okay? Because factually, you did a mitzvah. When we speak about supplication, where the basis is pleading, supplicating, supplication is only if you have your feeling and your mind is behind it.
Right.
Putting tefillin, say you put on tefillin. You observed the Shabbos. You didn't violate the Shabbos. You did it all. Is it qualitative? It's not qualitative. Whatever it is, it's something which is considered ordinary. Ordinary.
It's interesting, Rabbi, because you notice how you can emphasize that part of a sentence. I put on tefillin, or I put on tefillin. I mean, there's a difference between, maybe there isn't, simply wrapping straps around your arm and feeling that you've done the mitzvah of tefillin, which you say you get credit for, and taking a moment to stop and think and recognize what you're doing and where it comes from.
It's a different dimension of performance. Qualitatively, it elevates it to it's a whole different level.
Right.
That's why it's cited in definitive law. If it's better to say less than say more, when you say the less, you're more focused. Very often, you have a regular service in the synagogue, they go at a pace which sometimes you wonder how could they even say all the words. So definitely concentration, definitely not. But let's say you're a novice in reading and you can't keep up, but you'll take the essential and that's what you'll focus on.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't say it all.
That's
That he singles out less. The less is the equivalent of the more. Less with focus has greater value than more without focus. Even by a Torah law.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rabbi.
Okay. Shmuel.
We're still recording, Rabbi, you know that.